So, as always, you've got to look across the border to the Republic of Ireland to sometimes see what's going on and what their opinion of stuff going on is, because they are a pretty important player. Because if they don't think the deal is good for them, they will basically just veto it, and good for them if they do. Because as was said by Bonnie Greer on Question Time a couple of weeks ago, Ireland owes us nothing. It's true. They don't owe us anything. We're the ones who decided to leave. We're the ones that have caused this problem. We're the ones who needed to find solutions to these problems, and yet the Brexiteers, who, again, to quote, what's his name now? Conservative MEP. I can't remember his name now, but yeah, he's the fool who said that we wouldn't be leaving the single market, even though now he says that that's exactly what we need to do. Again, trying to leave for 40 years, but has had no solutions to these problems that have arisen. So, having been apparently dead 2 weeks ago, a Brexit deal has suddenly risen like the Lazarus from the dead. However, the prospect of a last-minute deal raises significant difficult issues in a number of actors in the Brexit drama. This miraculous resurrection was made possible by a sudden and dramatic shift in the policy of Boris Johnson's government, which abruptly abandoned many of its key red lines and has signed up to a deal that, to paraphrase Seamus Mallon, that takes on the Good Friday Agreement and amounts to Theresa May deal for the slow learners. I like that. So I like. In fact, we're going to call it now. It's the Theresa May deal for slow learners. So indeed, the only real significant losers are the DUP, who end up with arrangements that leave Northern Ireland technically with the UK customs zone, but effectively outside of it. The striking of a deal at the last minute raises hope of a significant legal and political issues, but it will be necessary to put the legal form on what are very complicated and intricate arrangements. In addition, the deal will have to be ratified by the European Parliament, and a large amount of legislation will have to be passed in Westminster. It is unlikely to be possible due to the October 31st deadline, so some kind of extension of UK membership under Article 50 will have to be necessary. The question then becomes, how long will that delay should be? Johnson may want only a short extension that gives only the time needed to ratify the deal. This would put Parliament in a difficult position. If the extension was short and Parliament rejected the legislation implementing the deal, it would risk the UK crashing out with no deal. Moreover, many in the opposition favour remaining in the EU or a much softer Brexit than envisioned by Johnson. They would want a longer extension that would allow the UK to hold a second referendum before any general election. Indeed, many MPs will be rightly reluctant to approve a deal in principle when the precise legal details of how it will apply have yet to be set out. Under the Benn Act, which Parliament approves in the agreement in principle that the obligation on the Prime Minister must seek an extension if it fails anyway, thus removing the main source of Parliament's current leverage over Johnson. For the Irish government and the EU, the speed and magnitude of the Prime Minister's change of heart should raise suspicions. The EU will be aware that it is their moment of maximum leverage over Johnson. The passage of the Benn Act has prevented him from leaving without a deal. There is no majority in Parliament, and they will soon face a general election. The British Prime Minister appears to have suddenly woken up to the fact that he did not make major concessions, that he was going to face a long extension and possibly in the end no Brexit at all. Such an outcome would bring the electoral catastrophe for the Tories. However, if Johnson can achieve the UK's exit by the time he faces the electorate, it will be much easier for him to hoover up the Brexit Party support. More importantly, from the EU perspective, once Brexit takes place, it is largely very difficult to reverse. While extending the UK membership before the Brexit only requires a vote in the European Council, bringing the UK back once it has left means following a very laborious task and the procedure set out in Article 49 of the Treaty of European Union, which includes ratification by the Parliament of each member state. This means that once Brexit has taken place, the EU will lose much of its leverage over Johnson. The Union will accordingly be very keen to ensure that the deal of how the deal will function and is nailed down with great precision in order to avoid a scenario where achieving the UK's exit from the EU and that Johnson then begins to seek to wiggle out of the commitments he has given. The Brexiteers argued for years that the EU only makes concessions at the last minute. Yet, what has happened is that the UK, at the very last minute, has dramatically dropped most of its key demands. It is a measure of the Prime Minister's evident desperation to get a deal that the UK now appears to be willing to sign up internationally to unprecedented measures that place the economic policy of part of its territory effectively under the control of another policy. However, EU negotiators and governments are now no doubt aware that this desperation in part reflects the full and legal and political realities that mean that if Johnson can get a Brexit deal over the line, that their ability to bend him to their will and hold him to his promises will be significantly reduced. A last-minute deal in principle without legal specifics is welcome from their perspective, but they will need to be careful to ensure that the rush to get things done does not cause them to drop their guard. And that's exactly the thing. And I love it now. That's great. I'm going to start calling it that now. It's Theresa May's deal for slow learners that Boris Johnson has now implemented. Obviously, that voting is happening today. I don't know exactly what time it's happening today, but it's almost 11:30, so it could have happened now. I don't know. But we'll see. Boris Johnson's deal. Boris Johnson's Theresa May's deal for slow learners. It's probably not going to pass. It will be close, I think, and I suspect. And if any, quite frankly, if I were Jeremy Corbyn, any Labour MP who votes for it should absolutely have the whip taken away from them, regardless of what happens. You cannot vote for this deal. It will be, in every single sense of the word, a complete betrayal of the working class, ensuring rights and what they have championed for years. They will be an absolute betrayal of the party. It cannot stand and it shouldn't stand, and if it does happen, those Labour MPs deserve to lose their position in the party and be reselected with someone else who recognises that rights are important to the people who they represent.